I'll touch briefly on some of the lore attached to Njal Stormcaller, but it's worth acknowledging straight away that he was first thought up in the very early editions of Warhammer 40,000, so there's loads of lore available to learn more about his background and the adventures he's been on. I've highlighted some of the available literature from Games Workshop and Black Library here, but if you've got any lore considerations, favourite sources or recommendations beyond this, please do share them in the comments below. Rune priests are mysterious figures amongst the Space Wolves, and they generally keep their distance from the non-psychic battle brothers, unless their physical foresight or prowess in battle is called upon. They differ from the librarians of the Codex-compliant chapters, their powers being used to summon storms and bend elements to their will. When battle calls them, they petition the spirits of Fenris, calling Grandfather Blizzard, the Lord of Lightning, and the World Wolf against their foes. Njal Stormcaller has known conflict his entire life. Before joining the priesthood, he was a mighty and furious, flame-haired warrior of his tribe. During a late summer migration across the Fenrisian seas, his tribe was set upon by rivals, and Njal led the defence to rebel the borders from his longboats. He pursued the attackers onto their own ships, relentlessly slaughtering them until none remained, and he lay on blood-soaked decks, a spear piercing deep beneath his breastplate. This event was the turning point for Njal. He was plucked from the jaws of Morkai by Rune priest Heimdall, whom would become his mentor as Njal was inducted into the Space Wolves. Njal learned fast and progressed into a powerful rune priest, wielding his psychic powers like none before him. He would avenge his mentor's death, hunting down and destroying the bloodthirster of Khorne that slew him, wielding wind and lightning to scatter the demon and his minions across the warp. From that day, Njal had become known as the Stormcaller. Undertaking many challenges and completing many deeds in the names of the Wolf Lords of Fenris, supporting Ragnar Blackmane, Logan Grimdark, and Bjorn Fellhanded as an advisor and formidable warrior, Njal is always accompanied by his unusual companion, Nightwing, a mechanically augmented raven that was gifted to him by an Iron Priest that he saved during the Battle of the Rustworld. Many who have sought to strike Njal down whilst he focused on summoning the spirits of Fenris have found themselves ambushed by a metallic beak attacking their eyes and flesh. When I first started out with Space Wolves many editions ago, Njal's miniature and cyber raven caught my attention, and, along with Ulrich the Slayer and Ragnar Blackmane, he was one of the first real characters that I would regularly take to the tabletop for any army. He was updated into Terminator armor for a spell in later editions, but now, with his refreshed sculpt, he returns in power armor and a 10th edition datasheet. But will he be wielding storms for your army on the tabletop? Or do his rules just feel a little bit soggy? His datasheet is that of the Space Marines librarian in general. Njal is faster with a 7-inch move, then toughness 4, 3+ save, 4 wounds, 6+ leadership and OC 1. Njal also differs in that he receives an inbuilt 4+ invulnerable save, where librarians instead only get this when leading units, albeit for the entire unit. Standard librarians would also confer 4+ feel no pain to the units they lead, where Njal has no such ability. So Njal is technically more durable than a librarian in isolation, where librarians make themselves and their units altogether more durable as leaders. Njal actually does have notable ranged output, a first for the Space Marines characters that I've covered so far in these videos. Through his staff of the Stormcaller, he can summon psychic range damage in the form of living lightning. You can choose this in standard form or focused form. Both forms are ranged 24 inches, hitting on 3+ at strength 7 with an AP -1 and damage 1. Both attacks also come with psychic and sustained 2 traits. If you go with standard Witchfire, you'll get d6 attacks with this profile. If you go with focused, you'll get 2d6 attacks with this profile, along with the hazardous trait. By way of reminder, if you choose to go with the 2d6 once the attacks are resolved, you roll a d6 for hazardous. On a 1, Njal takes 3 mortal wounds. Note, because he can't lead a unit where anyone else would have the hazardous trait, the wounds will have to be allocated to him. You won't be able to have his Blood Claws or Grey Hunters unit take the hit for him. Straight away, we're in almost good territory. The problem, of course, is the unpredictability of the attack. Sustained 2 is theoretically really nice, but if you roll low on the attacks, you're unlikely to activate this trait. Even in focused mode, 2d6 attacks could see you roll great and make 7 to 12 attacks to make the risk of hazardous worthwhile. That said, roll 6 or less, and you're then running the hazardous risk for no real payoff. On top of all of this, whilst strength 7 is decent enough to get you 3+ to wound against tougher foes, only having AP -1 and damage 1 means that you're still going to limit his effectiveness against well-armoured or multi-wound opponents. In melee, Njal is pretty good, with 4 attacks hitting on 3+, and strength 7, -1 AP, and damage D3. These attacks have the sustain 2 and psychic trait. It's all good, he'll contribute extra to a unit's output, but low AP again means he's not going to bring enough to reliably hit up against bigger foes, and the D3 damage is fine, not bad at all, just non-committal due to the randomness. Did I mention he has a bolt pistol? Well, he has a bolt pistol. Very disappointingly, there's no acknowledgement to Nightwing in his datasheet, either in the profile or in his abilities. As for those abilities, Windwalker is flat out brilliant for whomever he's leading. It gives automatic 6-inch advance and gives the unit the assault trait on the ranged weapons. For Bloodclaws, that complements their inbuilt advance and charge brilliantly. For Grey Hunters, it complements the bolt carbines, allowing them to move a whopping 13 inches and still shoot. Given their native abilities, this is really interesting. I'll come to this in more detail in a moment. His other ability is another almost good moment for the datasheet. Tempest Wrath means that any non-vehicle or monster unit that you hit with your Living Lightning has the ranged output reduced by 6 inches to a minimum of 12 inches. I'd rate this situationally a very annoying utility trait that could force your opponent's hand. And it frustrates me to say this, but it's too situational to be reliably good as an ability though, even though I want it to be. Standout moments when it's worked well for me include baiting enemy units to come for my Grey Hunters that were led by Njal. After being hit by Living Lightning, their range was reduced and their options would be to hide and do nothing for a turn, or move closer and shoot my Grey Hunters instead. They usually chose the latter, and this ultimately led to them being vulnerable for my counterattacks out of position of objectives, or actually underestimating the speed in which my Grey Hunters could move and the number of attacks they could put out with their chainswords. I really want to like this ability. I genuinely think there will be moments that you can utilise it to really frustrate your opponent, especially in casual play. In competitive play, it's going to be one of those, oh okay, I'll shoot someone else instead moments, rather than anything else most of the time. Melee armies like World Eaters, Blood Angels or such, or armies proficient in short-range shooting like Sisters of Battle, Thousand Suns, and certain Eldar lists, they're rarely going to bat an eyelid at this ability, unfortunately. Njal can lead Bloodclaws, Grey Hunters, and Headtakers. Starting with Bloodclaws, he brings his automatic 6-inch advance to their native advance and charge. Bloodclaws will skip all the way to the opposition with Njal as their leader. At this point he'll be fine, I suspect, but you will probably wish you'd spent 5 more points for Ragnar Blackmane. And this is the kicker. Would you roll a d6 for your advances and pay 5 more points to get full rerolls to wound, along with his 8 strength 6 AP -3 attacks? I'm sorry, I know this is a video about Njal, but yes you would, every time. Okay, so maybe Ragnar is going to be in your Headtakers unit, or you've taken 2 units of Bloodclaws. So Njal would be the best fit for the Bloodclaws, right? Well, 15 points less, and you can get a Wolf Priest with an almost identical datasheet and melee profile that gives the unit +1 to wound. Again, that feels like a fair trade in my book for having to roll for advances. And then the Battle Leader is 20 points cheaper for the really beefy melee profile that they bring, along with giving your Bloodclaws sustained 1 and rerolls of 1s to hit. With all of those attacks, that's nasty. I'm okay with rolling to advance for this. My point, Njal's good for Bloodclaws. The other options are just better. So what about Headtakers? The other standout unit. You know what? Everything I've already said applies here too. The auto advance isn't enough to change that fact, nice as it is, and Headtakers will enjoy it. And they don't care about the assault trait. So we come to Grey Hunters. Like Njal, they're a little bit problematic and an almost good unit themselves in many ways, but we'll cover that in a separate video. For now, Ragnar Blackmane doesn't compete with Njal for leadership since he can't lead Grey Hunters, so it's ultimately between Njal, the Wolf Priest, and the Battle Leader. What I've said previously still technically applies, but when you consider the role that the Grey Hunters play on the tabletop is much more of a utility unit, suddenly Njal does start to make a bit more sense. Unlike Bloodclaws and Headtakers, Grey Hunters can and will make use of the assault trait. You'll have a very fast-moving unit with his auto 6 advance that can cover ground and still pepper the enemy infantry with their bolt carbines. In the early turns, Living Lightning might even stop them being shot back. If they need to get up close to take an objective, they can get there fast with OC3. They're going to be really well positioned to take over objectives from most opponents even when they don't fully destroy the enemy. Their chainswords and native rerolls to wound should tear up a lot of lighter infantry though. Njal is more inviting here because, like Grey Hunters themselves, he can play a couple of different roles for you quite effectively, even if he doesn't stand out as exceptional in any of them. Of course, you could try running Njal solo. He's got some ranged output, and Tempest Wrath means you could, in theory, just pop off with Living Lightning at 24 inches range and disrupt the outputs of an enemy unit each turn, maybe do some damage depending on your dice. At 85 points though, he doesn't feel like an optimum use of him, and although he has a 4+ invulnerable save, with only 4 wounds, if he is being impactful, your opponent can probably bring some guns to bear to him to take him off the board. Keep in mind, his ability doesn't work against vehicles or dreadnoughts. I forgot, and Njal very sadly got on the wrong side of a Redemptor. No sagas will be sung in his name for that moment of madness. Looking at the Space Wolves detachments specifically, there are a few considerations for Njal. In Psyker the Hunter, none of the stratagems excite me when I read them with Njal in mind necessarily, but he will benefit from the native +1 to hit from the saga where he's outnumbering the foe in combat, as well as +1 to wound when you complete the saga. In Saga the Bold, getting either reroll to hit, wound, or damage roll is useful for Njal, not game-changing necessarily. In combat, you could turn a pull damage roll into a kill against a Marine, for example. Lethal hits from Inspiring Presence could be worth a CP if you're focusing your Living Lightning. Each 6 would be worth 1 auto wound and 1 normal hit. This could increase your output if you roll well. Champion's Guidance for a CP to reroll your hits could be a solid alternative if you need to take out a unit of light infantry and you're not so worried about the wound roll. Alpha Strike for Njal in the Grey Hunters unit for Advance and Charge is a good one. Saga of the Beastslayer sees Njal get lethal hits against vehicles, characters and monsters. It's fine, but his lack of AP and damage output means he's still relying on failed saves, and his lack of reliability with attacks means you can't even be sure to put out enough to get the 6s and benefit from the lethal hits. Stratagem-wise, pinning fire falls in line with the role Njal might play in a unit of Grey Hunters. An enemy character, monster, or vehicle unit you hit would have the move, rune, and charge characteristic reduced by 2 inches. If they're a character unit, they also lose 6 inches from their range output due to Tempest Wrath. That unit's going to be heavily restricted for a turn for the sake of a CP. Situationally, this is potentially very useful to keep in mind and might determine how you use Njal in this detachment against some enemies. The reactive move, Thunderous Pursuit, is another useful one for Njal in a unit of Grey Hunters, allowing them to reactively reposition up to 6 inches when an enemy moves within 9. For a utility unit, that can be really useful, another to keep in mind for the right situation. In summary, Njal is problematic in the same way that many Psychers are a little problematic in 10th edition. Firstly, the Psyker keyword is often a negative more than a positive due to the existence of anti-Psyker traits and abilities. Secondly, because his psychic powers are fudged into a range profile, there are limitations to what can be achieved. He's restricted to doing damage with a corresponding ability to try and make it more interesting. The problem is, by trying to make his ranged attack feel more like a psychic attack, it actually suffers. The variable number of attacks is too random to be relied on, and Tempest Wrath is going to be completely useless against certain opponents. To be fair to Games Workshop, they've made his unit buffs different, and I think this is really important. I don't want a selection of characters that are all good, but ultimately all the same. Variation makes for more interesting army choices and tabletop experiences. His Auto 6 Advance is really good for Space Wolves, and by giving them Assault, it feels like Grey Hunters is where Njal should find his home, and his unusual, slightly utility profile will then complement theirs. The thing is, in my mind, Grey Hunters are a really considered purchase at the current points cost. I like them, but they're competing with a lot of units that are very strong in specific roles in Codex Supplement Space Wolves, and I'm not convinced they bring enough for their cost in competitive play at this time. When somebody asked me how I'd fix Njal, I'll admit to being a little bit unsure. I toyed with giving him fixed attacks, maybe 3 plus D3 and 6 plus D3 for the standard and focused Living Lightning respectively, as well as an extra pip of AP would be nice. I also considered Nightwing's role, and maybe giving Njal some kind of indirect fire ability or an inbuilt reactive move for him and his unit. Honestly, I don't know that there's a true solution, whilst psychic abilities are restricted into datasheets as they are in 10th edition, although I like what Games Workshop did in principle, and I do think removing the psychic phase after 9th edition streamlined the game somewhat. It does leave Psychers feeling a little lacking in identity and efficiency. A points drop is an obvious and usual go-to for Games Workshop, and I think it won't be long before Njal does get an adjustment. I'll still stand by this video even when that happens. Njal is nearly good at a lot of things, but not reliable enough to hit the mark fully. Even if he's reduced by 5 or 10 points or so, I still don't see him being taken in competitive lists. I've already decided that in competitive play, Njal would only make the cut for me if I was taking a unit Grey Hunters, and even then he'll be a low priority take after I've satisfied myself that I've got the core of my army. There are just too many better options for leaders at the Space Wolves' disposal to put 85 points down on a character whose contributions are so dice-reliant. In casual, I'll take him with Grey Hunters against some opponents, maybe run him solo when I'm just looking for an excuse to get him on the tabletop for the fun of it. He's a cool character and his sculpt looks amazing. I don't like not to play with my toys when I've spent so much money and time on them. I will almost certainly build a very thematic army around him when I fancy playing Warhammer 40,000 on hard mode or for narrative play. In fact, I fully plan to. And the entire time, I'm going to look sadly at Nightwing on that glorious sculpt and wonder why Games Workshop neglected the little fella so. If this video has been at all useful, please like and subscribe to show your support for this new channel. If you've got your own takes on Njal Stormcaller, share them in the comments, particularly if you've got some lore points I didn't cover or some in-game considerations others might benefit from. Thanks for watching, keep hobbying.